Oh my gosh.
Kind of lay the groundwork.
Is that a whole lot? I don't know yet. I'm sitting here.
Okay, me neither, I just,
No.
Tanya, you know everybody here, do we need to interview?
Yes, I know everybody.
You good?
Yes.
Tanya, I got 10 o'clock, you ready?
10 o'clock, yes, sir, you may start.
I'd like to go ahead and call the school board workshop on guardian programs and SRO contracts for Tuesday, June 1st to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Thank you for being here today, and thank you. I know you've all done work since we last met, so I appreciate that. I think everybody knows everybody now. It's at the table, so we're not going to do introductions. Tanya, for the record, knows it. So I think we've got a couple presentations, Chief, and if you'd like, we'll kind of turn it to you to get that started and lay the groundwork, and I think that will lead the way to the discussions we're going to have. I had Terry Castillo is online. Terry, can you hear us?
We're trying to get her in.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go ahead and start. But,
Thank you.
Hello.
hey, Terry. Is that Terry? Can you hear us, Terry? Maybe I'm the problem. Can you hear me, Terry? We'll give her 1 second here, see if they can.
Yeah, I looked at it. These are things that the school program doesn't have anything to do with it.
Chief, let's just keep moving. Chief, I'm gonna kind of turn it to you to.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So just kind of quick.
Good morning.
Good morning, Terry. Can you hear us?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Terry. Can you hear us or not? Let's keep going, and we'll be here.
Okay.
They'll figure that out in the back.
Right. So initially, how we'll do it this morning, everybody was provided some follow-up information. Major Weiss is going to touch on the Guardian program a little bit. Then we have a representative who introduced from Polk County who's run their program for 3 years. And then also Orlando Munoz, who introduced to talk about his company supplies Guardian programs and has been doing it for actually before Marjorie Stoneman Douglas to schools. And then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end as far as what we'd like to present, and then certainly we could have any questions after that. So, Mr. Weiss?
Thank you, Chief. Dr. Page provided everybody with the PowerPoint presentation that we met with the charter schools on last Tuesday. I'm not going to go over the whole PowerPoint presentation, but I wanted to highlight some of the Guardian components about it, because that's why we're here today. Also with me is Mr. Michael Wiggins. He's from Polk County School Board. He runs their Guardian program. And then at the end, if you guys have any questions about how the Guardian program is run from that perspective, he's here to answer them, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yes, good morning.
So, as many of you know, the background on the program, the Guardian program was created back in 2018 as a result of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. This district, in conjunction with the law enforcement agencies, decided at that time to not use the Guardians, right? There were 3 choices at the time. There was the Guardians, the SSOs, safety security officers, and an SRO. At that particular juncture, the Guardian program hadn't been created yet. So the school board, in conjunction with law enforcement, decided that we're going to keep SROs. So that's kind of why we're here today in our discussions. So the Guardians, they're armed personnel who aid in the prevention or abatement of active assailant incidents on school premises, right? So a big misconception, I think, through some of our conversations was that guardians are teachers and guardians are custodians, that just, we hand them a gun and say, hey, when you're done teaching, can you go take the post? Well, that's the farthest from the truth as far as guardians go, and throughout this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about that. But they could be, but certainly we don't advocate that. So the guardian programs, their job duties are, to stop assailants, active shooters, and different things like that. They must pass the psychological and drug screenings, and they have a minimum of 144 hours training, which we'll talk about. So the 144 hours training is mandated by Florida State statute and through Criminal Justice Training and Standards Commission. 12 hours is a certified nationally recognized diversity training, and 132 hours are firearms training, and I'll get into that. Certainly, that's the minimum training. There's a lot of districts and counties that offer more training than just the minimum, and especially when they recertify. So we'll talk about that. Again, some sheriff's officers require more training. So 80 hours of firearms instruction is based on we call it CJIS, Training Academy model. So during that 132 hours of training, they shoot more than a recruit shoots in a cadet law enforcement scenario, anywhere between 10 and 20% more, and they have to score a higher percentage to pass, an 85, which in law enforcement, it's 80%. So that just kind of tells you that it's pretty critical, the amount of training they get and how important it is as far as firearms training. Additional training requirements are 8 hours of discretionary shooting, 8 hours instruction in active shooter or assailant scenarios, 8 hours instruction in defensive tactics, 12 hours in legal issues, 16 hours of instruction in precision pistol, and 12 hours of human diversity. So that just kind of shows you the diversity of the training that is required. And, guardians aren't just thrown in without any training. They're actually receive quite a bit of training. As far as their certificates goes, the training is provided by a sheriff's office once either the district board or the sheriff's office approve implementing the guardian program. So each sheriff's office will provide the training and keep their certificates, because every year they have to recertify, and they do that through the sheriff's office. Some sheriff's offices do the minimum to requalify, and some sheriff's office make them do twice a year. Like in Polk County, the Polk County Sheriff's Office makes them qualify twice a year instead of just once a year. So it just varies between different districts. Again, the Sheriff's Office shall maintain documentation of the weapons, equipment, inspections, and all of their records when it relates to their guardian certificate. And of course, guardians must be recertified on an annual basis. And then there are funds that are provided by the state that pay for the training and the retraining. Some sheriff's offices, like I said, make them qualify twice a year, 3 times a year, but there's a minimum qualification of at least once a year.
Do they have access to your shooting ranges for practice during the year?
Certainly we can make arrangements for that. Yeah.
We're gonna create an MOU.
I mean, just shooting twice a year is.
Right. Recertification requirements that are determined by the sheriff's office responsible for the initial certificate. So if our sheriff's office holds their certificate, then we're responsible for them to get recertified. We maintain their records and all of that stuff. So it's very controlled. And again, the guardian qualifications, it varies a little bit, but minimum qualifications are high school diploma or GED, a minimum of 2 years within the last 10 years of experience as a law enforcement officer, armed security guard, or military experience. This is like Sheriff Lopez had said, this is a good avenue. There's a lot of veterans out there that would do very well in this, and they would certainly meet the qualifications. Additional qualifications is they must complete the ongoing training and recertify every year. If they go out to the range and they can't pass, then they won't be a guardian. 21 years of age, valid driver's license, it goes so on and so forth. You can see it there. Some of the responsibilities that guardians have are use whatever force is necessary to prevent or abate an active assailant incident. That's why they're on the school campus, is to stop that type of violence. Immediately respond, engage to stop a threat, conducts perimeter, inner and outer perimeter security checks, utilizes and monitors surveillance technology. So all those type of things that an SRO would do, they're doing the very same thing. But the distinction between the guardian and the SRO, we talked about, is they do not have law enforcement powers. So anytime a guardian is faced with something other than an active shooter, where they're, by statute, they're allowed to take care of that situation, if you will. But anything else, they would call law enforcement and we would respond to the schools. And again, provide support.
Explain that a little deeper if you can. You kind of
Sure.
lost me there.
So the guardians, they don't have law enforcement powers, so they would not be able to investigate a child abuse or do those type of things, or a battery on a teacher. They would
But
call
they
law
can address
enforcement.
the battery on the teacher as it's happening and stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's-
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And any type of assailant, any type there's, immediate violence, they would take care of it. But they don't have arrest powers or law enforcement powers.
So they have the ability to detain?
I'm sorry?
To detain somebody until
Yes.
you get there?
Yes, absolutely. And they also provide support in school and district emergency situations, and they also participate in all the drills, lockdowns, active shooter drills, hostage drills, and things like that. So they're partnered with the school, and I think you'll hear later from some of the, either the Guardian program or the security company. They'll tell you a little bit more about that. And again, as we go on, it just, the rest of my presentation just talks about the responsibilities through Florida State statute on how we work with the school board, and we provide the training and different things like that. So, that's pretty much the Guardian program in a nutshell. I know, if you want to elaborate on anything?
I think Ms. Castillo has a question. Ms. Castillo, do you have a question?
I do have a question. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being flexible, and thank you for the team for allowing us to be able to listen in via WebEx. My question is, listen, I've been talking to a lot of parents and charter school operators and community members. Their biggest issue, besides the fact that they seem to not want guardians, right? But this is a conversation we're having. Is I want to know as well if there was an option for someone other than a veteran to be a guardian. Who else can do this? And I'm specifically wondering why we are not tapping into our retired law enforcement pipeline. And, because I feel like the community might be more comfortable with that. That's at least what I've heard on my end. So I'm wondering, what are the limitations to possibly tapping into retired law enforcement versus veterans for this particular job?
Well, I have an answer for the veteran part. I'm a veteran, 22 years, and I cannot believe that people that live in our community are not happy with a veteran going into a guardian program. Shameful on them. We sacrifice everything. Our families sacrifice everything back home for us to take care of this great nation. There's a lot of veterans that don't have PTSD, that are functioning fine, that are combat trained, that can't get jobs in the combat field and are working at a Home Depot or a grocery store. They would be perfect to do these jobs, and they want to do these jobs. You're not going to get a better, higher trained person that's willing to sacrifice himself for this country. Of course, if he wants to do the job, he's going to do that also for children and for our community. And as for the retired teachers, we're trying aggressively, the retired law enforcement officers, we have tried to aggressively recruit them, but they're not showing a big interest. A lot of them spend 25, 30 years as a deputy. You know, they want to move on to go fishing and do other things. There are some that are coming back. I mean, this is not an easy field to be in, especially if you dedicate 25, 30 years to this. We have recruited quite a few SSOs. However, it's just we're not getting the recruitment that we'd like in order to help offset the guardian, to employ other people in different capacities as a guardian.
And Ms.
Thank you, Sheriff Lopez. I appreciate your insight. And I think that it's not so much out of disrespect or anything that the community, or the people I've spoken to at least, I don't know about anybody else, it's not about being disrespectful. I think it's people want to have something as close to an SRO as possible. And in this particular case, thank you for mentioning the SSO option. That is the option that we find to be a little bit closer to us. So that's the reason I think why the suggestion was made. My follow-up question is, and this might just be for the school board in general, is there anything we can do as one of your partners in order to help you with the recruitment process? I mean, I don't know, I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we would have to partner in this way, but I want to know if there are limitations for us to be able to partner with our law enforcement agencies in order to help with the recruitment process.
Ms. Castillo, if I could add a little bit more on the first, I think you'll hear for sure from Mr. Munoz later on in the presentation that we'll talk about how many reserve officers that they have. So that's former law enforcement, I shouldn't have said reserve, former law enforcement officers as part of their program in Miami. And he will also, he supplies guardians to Orange County, which is obviously, our neighbor. And based on the applications that he received, he's confident, just for those 10 charter schools in Orange County, that he will get a number of law enforcement officers interested here. It's a different dynamic when we're recruiting them specifically for the agency and as part as a reserve program. We just don't have a huge number of reserves here, but when you can tap into Orange County and the neighboring counties, it increases our numbers. And I think we're only talking about a total of 25 charter schools. So I think later on he will answer that. The recruiting is, I don't know that there's anything else. That we've done it, we've recruited it. That's just not a viable option for us to spend a lot of time doing. As you know, we all have vacancies and we spend a majority of that time trying to fill current vacancies in our agency.
Mr. Melendez?
Thank you for your insight.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a legal question, because I don't have a PowerPoint number here, because it's not, other than counting the individual numbers. This is one title information from Senate bills. It says if a local school board has voted to implement a coach program, if a charter school governing board, which doesn't refer to all of them, wishes to implement a guardian program. So I'm confused. So in order for guardian program to occur, from a technical standpoint, does a school board have to officially vote on it in order for do it? Because it sounds like the law enforcement agencies want to do it unilaterally, but do they require our vote to say, yes, we want a guardian program for the school district, and then also such a charter board? It looks like each charter school has that option according to the law.
Before you
So
go that
that
far,
way each
they
charter
actually
school
have
can say
that
what they
option
want.
today, Julius. We are not dictating what they do today.
Correct, but I'm saying, but to continue it though, like even for tomorrow, like if like say for instance, Four Corners Charter School says they definitely want an SRO no matter what, and the principal's indicated it and everybody wants it, can the law enforcement agencies have the ability to say, no, we're not gonna give you an SRO?
Yes.
Or so that's the confusing part.
The option is this. They can vote not to have an SRO and say they want to do a guardian program. And if the sheriff in the county says we're not going to have guardians, they, under the statute, have the right to go to a sheriff's department that provides guardians, to ask that department to provide trained guardians for the school. So it's, the option is to not take an SRO and go to a guardian. It's not, we're not going to have guardians, and sheriff, you're stuck with our decision. You have to.
So what if they vote to have an SRO?
Yeah, so then we
The
are
opposite.
dictating.
And so what if the charter board gets together and votes and say, we wanna have an SRO? And let's say the local sheriff doesn't wanna do it, do they then have that same option to go into, say, Orange County or some
No.
other county to be able to provide that?
It simply goes to the guardians. So they're stuck with, I use the word stuck, ultimately, law enforcement in the county, a sheriff decides whether the guardian program is going to happen or not, where the school board or a charter school can say, we don't want an SRO, we want a guardian. Okay, but you can't mandate that they put an SRO in the school. It's totally within law enforcement's control, the local governing body.
I was gonna kind of do this at the end, but it might be a good idea to talk about it now, just so we're approaching this. You know, we've got two gentlemen that have run Guardian programs here, and so I want us to be able to hear what they have to say and not come from this isn't a negotiation, as bluntly as I can put it. The school board's tasked with ensuring one of the three options are in each of the schools. The law enforcement here is telling you that we cannot staff it as we've traditionally tried for 3 school years now. So that option is off the table. So that leaves us with security officers or guardian program, and that's what we need to go forward with.
That's
You know,
disappointing, that's disappointing to hear.
can I finish, Mr. Melendez?
Super
And so, you know, rightfully so, you all are concentrating on a small piece of the pie, a very important piece of the pie. The 3 law enforcement agencies do not have that luxury. We've got to look at the entire community that we serve, and that's what we're doing. And so we've got examples of professional guardian programs throughout the state surrounding us. It is a fantastic option in everything that we've seen. There is no public outcry. There are no media stories every other day, and there's nobody getting voted out of office. It is an option, and if you read the law when it first came out, it really pushed towards the Guardian program. We try not to do it, but we're having. If I go back 3.5 years ago, we sat at the group, a few different members, but this board voted specifically not to mandate the Guardian program on their charter school. They made a business decision not to do that because it then becomes their liability to pay for it. That would have been a significant hit on the budget, which would have ultimately, I can assume, impacted educational programs. So you made a business decision, we supported you then, we're making one now, and we're asking you to support it, but we don't need your permission. And so as blunt as that is, that's really how we need to go forward this morning.
Quick. Excuse me. No, you go. I have a series of questions here. Number one, what's the purpose of this meeting then? The purpose of this meeting is for us to be able to allow questions and dialogue about this, correct?
Yes, sir.
So for me, I would appreciate it if we stepped back from the emotion a little bit and got back to the black and white of the program, because that's going to be, I think, a waste of time for the people that we're representing. I have a question in regards to, we're feeling, what you're saying is that this is an administrative issue that we don't have the bodies to fill. So if we don't have the bodies to fill, we're talking about veterans here filling these slots, or whoever else, veterans working at Home Depot or whatever. Why don't we just hire them as cops then? If the issue is that we can't find the people to fill these slots to be cops, right? Then how are we going to fill these people to be guardians? Or are these just law enforcement rejections that cannot be law enforcement officers, and then we're going to put them in our school to protect our kids?
John, can I add something to that question?
Sure.
Because as you start to think about that, because that's a question that I have too. My question's a little bit different, but it's the same question. If we have these people who are qualified to be what we would say are guardians, they don't have to worry about how to do DUIs and murder investigations or any of that. What is the option? And I don't understand law enforcement, but I know you have ranks. You come in as something, and then you're a lieutenant, a sergeant, or whatever. What is the possibility of having a different rank, school resource officer, whatever you want to call it, that is not qualified to go do a murder investigation, but they are qualified to do this, to where those people stay under the auspices of your control that we trust, quite frankly. And we trust, and there's accountability. So have y'all looked at that? Because I get that you can't hire somebody to do the whole gamut. You're having a hard time finding that. But you seem to be, as a group, very comfortable that you can get this tier that can handle this role and the required functions of that role. So same question John has, but just, and they would be deputized or whatever you would call it as a police officer, sworn officer. So same question he's got, but is there an option that you would have a different category of an employee or a different rank of an employee that might not have a car and might not have, certain things? They might not be in the same retirement programs. I don't know. I'm just that's part of my same question,
And
these
that
guys.
goes back to staffing it, and so the staffing has been on the law enforcement agencies. A lot of these people are retired, have already finished a first career, and are retired law enforcement. In fact, I've had for 3 years, a contracted SRO who was a retired KPD officer, was an SRO. I'm sure the sheriff's office, I know that they have a couple, I'm not sure if Chief Gauntlet does. But when we hire them as an employee, even though it's just an SRO, they're still obligated for a lot more training and curriculum and things that we have to provide them, and it's just not, there's a certain part of law enforcement that they don't want to do all those extra things, and we've had it. Orange County, that is an option. Same thing, they have very few of those, but the Guardian programs seem to remain full, and so
What is the pay difference between a guardian and a law enforcement officer?
I think this gentleman would
In
probably.
Polk County, they start at 30,000, whereas
The guardian does?
the Guardian started at 30,000 per year with benefits. They're a 10-month employee, so they follow the same school calendar as students, whereas a starting deputy is 54,000. And that's approximate.
Yeah, so why would somebody want to be a guardian for 30,000? They can make 54,000 as a deputy.
What about if they don't want
Well,
to?
It's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and Christmas off, and summer's off. I mean, I would see that as an appeal to somebody.
Right, the schedule is definitely an attraction. We have retired law enforcement, we have military folks, and then we have grandparents that, their students, their grandchildren go to school, so they want to participate. We have a lot of people from the community that want to participate in the program because it's important to them. And I think what I'm hearing is you're proud of your law enforcement, you trust your law enforcement in this county, but statewide, there are vacancies in law enforcement. They don't have enough to fill their primary roles, let alone the extra roles to contract out to a school. So in Polk County, we were short 80,000 or 80 people to fill our schools. There's no way we could have found 80 law enforcement personnel to fill our schools back when this became law. So we had to resort to something to comply with the statute. You have to have a person in school every day the students are there. We went with the Guardian program because we just cannot find the officers to do it.
So,
John,
Yes.
I know you've got more questions. Would it make sense to go through the next two presentations with yours and the other guy and then come back to the questions? Because maybe some of those will get, I don't want to cut them off and not get to them, but I want to get to our questions too.
Well, yeah, sure, that's fine.
No, go ahead. If you got something that's intermediate, let's do it.
Well, I
If
just
they-
want to address it now because it's fresh, but
Okay, go ahead.
if we're talking 54 to 30,000, no one is going to leave they make more money at Home Depot. So a veteran's not going to leave Home Depot to come work to be a guardian at a school.
You're not factoring in the car, the equipment. You're talking about over $100,000. So there's a lot more involved
To a
than,
guardian?
you're talking about just a salary?
No, it's the cost.
Yeah,
It's
for
not,
guardians, you mean
it's
way
not
less,
what they're
because they have their own
paying.
vehicle, they supply their own
And
their own
in theory,
things.
Mr. Aguirre, that is logical, but we've got representation
Yeah, I
here
can
that
tell
tells
you-
you that
I
they
can
filled
tell
it.
you-
Okay, so let me get to the bottom line to the most important thing. Is the level of security the same?
Yes,
Do you agree?
yes.
Is the
I'm
level of
training
security the same?
and what I know, yes, sir, in a different capacity. Now, they're not gonna investigate crimes, but if we're talking about school shootings and we're talking about engagement in the school and
So,
getting to know the students.
What you're saying
Can I
is that
finish
a
my answer?
grandfather in the community, actually what I want the answers to my question.
I'm trying to answer, but you cut me
So
off,
you said
sir.
yes, Chief Gauntlet, do you agree that this level of security is the same?
You're comparing apples to oranges and I
Yes,
have to
I think
say-
that you guys are comparing, you guys are switching apples for oranges in
Let me
security.
finish, because I know this is,
If-
Please, John.
you guys have kind of demonized the concept, in my opinion, of the Guardian program. And there's many counties in the state that have done exceptional work, Polk County being one of them. What we are attempting to tell you is that we do not have the bodies and the resources within our organizations to fill the slot. You can compare, you can say as an Is an officer or a deputy more qualified than a guardian? Of course they are, when it comes to their level of training and expertise and authority. But in this particular case, in guarding the schools themselves, there's very little difference. Taking enforcement, legal authority, arrest powers, yes, there is clearly a difference. But the bottom line is this. Our community in St. Cloud, I am perpetually shorthanded in staff. It is a massive, continual problem for us to recruit. We can't keep up this trend. This is not something that law enforcement chooses to do or wants to do necessarily. It's out of pure necessity that we're having to go down this road, because from a financial standpoint, we can't keep up with the staffing, and the staffing we got to look for creative ways. This is a successful program that will go a long way to help offset and make our community safer, because when one SRO can't get to one of the schools, we have to pull somebody off the road. That impacts the community in a negative way. And I think we have to be realistic that in today's day and age, our limited resources are just that. We've got a lot of work to do. It's unfortunate, but we have to be able to understand the fact that this is a solution to our operational problem, period.
I think that there's an issue here that is, the most disturbing part of this is that we really can't we're starting to repeat ourselves, in the sense that what you're telling me is that this is an operational issue. We get that, right? We get that. That's been said many times. We get that. We get that issue. I think that everybody knows it now. It's very clear. What we're trying to do now, right, is follow the lead that you guys have started. You guys have said you guys are making this switch to guardians regardless of any input from any other person or body. So you guys are doing it. So now the questions are about the guardians themselves. So I'm not demonizing the process. I think that what's being demonized here is really the process, because number one, the genesis of this happened in a closed door meeting outside of the public, and now we're all tagging along as a ride, not in the sense going together, walking together along this path. So that's one issue. The other one is, I want to know what the difference in security is for the students of Osceola County. Whether they're in charter school, I don't care. And a lot of people have made this. Is this public? Is this charter? Is this whatever? That doesn't matter to me. Contrary to what the sheriff said at the last meeting, I doubt I'm going to find one parent who cares more about a radio than their student. And so what I want to know is, how much more are we going to be protecting radios over students? And I want the clear answer and responsibility to be on you guys to state that honestly and openly, to say what the deficiencies will be, and then for you guys to accept responsibility for that change. Because as much as you guys need to make this change for your administrative purposes, I'm also very fearful that there's going to be, if something were to happen, okay, and it happens because of this change in decision, I think it's very short-sighted. If you guys are having trouble filling seats for any other purpose, you're going to have trouble filling seats for this. And if you're telling me that the level of security has dropped 50%, then that's something that the community should hear their law enforcement chiefs and sheriff say. We're reducing your security by 50% because we have a 50% capacity missing in police uniforms. So those are the problems that need to be fixed for the community. Those are the problems that they care about. They don't care necessarily about the troubles that you're having administrating the logistics of your forces. And neither do I, to be honest with you. I can empathize with it, but the fact is, what I care about is the security. If I choose to put my son in a charter school tomorrow, is he going to have 50% less security than him? I think that's the question that we need to be answered, and I think that you guys need to be forthcoming with that answer, and then allow the community to have input into that process. It's that simple.
Yes.
And all due respect, sir, Polk County is a different animal than Osceola County. And Miami is a different animal than Osceola County. And so they may be able to tell us that their guardian programs are phenomenal. And they may be. Okay? But the fact is, we have a product right now. You're taking that product away and you're replacing it with an inferior product, is what you're telling me. And so I want to know how inferior that product is. And I want to know, in the end, that the guarantee is going to be the same from you guys. And And I want you guys to take responsibility. I'd like the sheriff to take responsibility and say, you know what, we're making this decision, it's on us, we're making it, and this is the way forward on this, and you call us when we have a problem.
Yeah, but we've already said that's what
Let's
we're doing.
let the two people here that are the resource, give us their point of view. Some of those questions I would expect they would address it here, and then we can carry on with the conversation. Because I'm curious what, I kind of said last time, I want to hear how a Guardian program works or is working. And I think that's what Chief Odell is probably trying to do. So, Chief, you want to,
Well, if you want to just give a quick
or
overview.
if you want to go, however y'all, whichever
Okay,
direction.
first of all, I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Mike Wiggins. I'm from Polk County Public Schools. I am a 6-year Army veteran, a 25-year veteran of the Polk County Sheriff's Office. So, and I'd like to say that we are here today because an SRO was assigned to a school in Broward, and there was a very tragic shooting. So even with that law enforcement presence, something very bad happened. We have currently 112 guardians operating in our schools. They are assigned to elementary, our technical colleges. We have guardians in charter schools as well, our adult schools, and at a Head Start location. We train quarterly with the Sheriff's Office, and we qualify twice a year. I probably have 1 to 2 guardians that do not make the initial qualification and will qualify on the second attempt. So I have 100% qualification every time we go out to the range and qualify with the Sheriff's Office. And that's at 85%, which is above the 80 that's required of a law enforcement officer. So I'm confident that should an active assailant event happen at a school in Polk County, our guardians and our law enforcement will do the right thing to protect our students. I have 15 vacancies currently. When I posted my position, I had over 50 applicants apply, and I need about 50 to make that 15 number. By the time you go through the initial interview process, and then you go through the psychological drug screening and the background that the Sheriff's Office does, we'll end up with a 30 student class out of those 50 applicants. Out of that 30, we were at 50%, but the training is getting better. I think the quality of applicants is getting better. We'll probably have 20 to 25 that will actually complete that program. So we're getting better. I retain about 90% of my guardians every year. So every year I would have to hire, 10 to 12 after the school year, but I think that's just natural. People move on to do different things, go to Home Depot, make more money, things of that nature. We have guys that have done 30 years at Sheriff's Office, done a lot of officers from Puerto Rico work with us, so I don't really have a presentation for you. I can answer any of your questions that you may have about our program, but I really don't have a formal presentation.
Mike, you are an employee of the school district, right?
I am an employee of the school district. My last 2 years at Sheriff's Office, I was a captain and I was in a dual contract position. I was the director of Safe Schools, which was a contract position with the school board. In 2018, the statute created the school safety specialist position. I retired after my 25 years and then transitioned into that position. I've been there since.
Are the guardians in Polk County, are they school district employees?
Yes, our guardians are school district employees, and all 112 belong to me.
Okay.
So it puts the liability now on us. So instead, so if something happens, we can no longer shed that liability, at least in Polk County, they can't shed that liability to law enforcement agencies. So if something happens to the guardian, then the school district's 100% liable for an incident.
I think if the school district contracted with the Sheriff's Office, you're still holding some degree of liability
Yeah,
because
but not 100%.
you place that person in school, you contracted with the school board.
As
I'm
the
not here
lawyer,
for the
let me just
legal
say-
aspect because I'm not an attorney.
Yeah, as the lawyer for the district officially, we have no responsibility for these officers when they're doing their law
So we go
enforcement.
from 0 to 100.
Okay, well,
That,
yes, they
just,
are
this is the
district-
official
yes,
position.
They are district employees.
Do you, can I ask you, in reading the literature on DOE on this, they say there's 43 counties with guardianship programs, and then there's some issues. Do you have your guardians wear uniforms?
Yes, we have both. We have non-uniform guardians in our charter schools, and we have uniform guardians. The guardians that report to me are uniform guardians. Correct.
Then, I'm just going through some of this. Do they wear their guns exposed or?
Yes.
Okay,
We have both. The non-uniform naturally are concealed.
right.
The uniform guardians are exposed, correct.
In Polk County, when the guardians started going into place, was there 0 presence before then? So they didn't go from an SRO to a guardian. They went from nothing, so then you got a guardian. Is that correct?
We had SROs in our middle and high schools prior to the mandate and the statute. So prior to 2018, we did not have SROs or in
I mean, prior to
elementary
2018,
schools.
prior to 2018.
Yes, we did not have them in elementary schools. We did have SROs in middle and high school.
So is there a hybrid then? So that do some schools in Polk County have a SRO and some have a guardian?
Middle and high schools have SROs.
So the guardians never replaced an SRO. So the guardians that came in, so the school had 0. So it's like the analogy I would say is like you're walking to school and now they get like a little Honda Civic and like, hey, they're excited. And here we got like a Ferrari. You know, we got the Ferrari of SROs. So now we're going to tell somebody to switch from a Ferrari to a Honda Civic. But in Polk County, you're saying it's successful because they had nothing before. They had 0. So if you do a survey of Polk County and say, hey, are you happy with your guardian? They're happy they got something because before they had nothing. We didn't strip away the SRO in Polk County and switch them to a guardian.
Correct. We did
Absolutely.
not have.
So it's not fair, so we're talking about apples to oranges.
Wait a minute,
Apples to oranges as well.
Let's get this, I think there's one more presentation, is that correct, Chief?
In absence of an SRO, a guardian fills that role for that SRO. So because we have to have someone in the school,
Absolutely.
if that SRO is not available to work that day, then we plug a guardian into that role at that middle or high school.
Mike, so the only role that a guardian fulfills is the job of preventing a shooting process, a shooting situation scenario.
They are not law enforcement, so they do not perform some of the duties that an SRO, they just can't.
They don't teach classes, for example, or anything like
Correct.
that,
They
right?
don't have a drug testing too, like we have a lot of drugs in our school, like when we do the testing kits and stuff like that. So guardians are not allowed to conduct a drug test on campus, correct?
No, they do not do drug
So
testing.
there goes half the function there too that we do. We have a
I
lot of
wouldn't call
drugs.
that half. That's probably a very minuscule part of it.
No, half of what an SRO does in our school.
It's not half of what an SRO.
You're
Wait a minute, let's stay on time, let's not get 6 conversations going here. I do want to hear what I would say, is it a private guardian
this,
company?
yes.
As opposed to a district-sponsored, controlled, owned? I'd like to hear that too, because then we kind of have, then I want to go back to all these questions, because I don't have any issue with the questions, but I want to kind of get all it'll help me to get all the facts, then we can have these discussions.
Okay.
We can beat them up.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Orlando Munoz, who's the director of EGPS, which is a security company. They've been providing, didn't call it a Guardian program, but a Guardian program prior to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, so about 5 years. Started in Miami. They now service Orange County as well. Very professional group, and I'll let him speak. He is the director.
Good morning, everyone. As the chief said, my name is Orlando Munoz. I'm the retired police sergeant out of Dade County, and have about 25 years of law enforcement experience. Majority of my experience in field operations, I was a SWAT team member, as well as the canine handler, dual purpose patrol dog, as well as explosive protection. In 2012, EGPS was established as a security guard company. Over the past 5 years, we started contracting with academic right here in Dade County, providing security to a number of their locations throughout the county. Today, our single focus of business is school security. We do not do anything other than school security, so our complete focus is on delivering security to a number of schools. We currently operate in 4 counties. We operate in Miami-Dade, Broward County, Palm Beach County, as well as Warren County. We've continued to grow successfully throughout the past few years due to our level of customer service and attention to detail. 3 things that typically cause the school to use us are the first being that we are offering trained, experienced, well-supervised guardians. I know there's talk about experience and where these guardians are coming from. Just next door to you in Orange County, this school had 10 guardians working for us. Of those 10, 9 of them are prior law enforcement, or prior military, or actively certified law enforcement. You are in a very good position in Central Florida, being that you get a lot of transplants from up north, a lot of retirees that still want to work and have experience in law enforcement, moving to Central Florida. So I see a lot of resumes coming to my office with experience that correlates well into the guardian program. Like I said, we provide all documentation and training, ensure that the guardians are well equipped. We do wear uniforms with exposed handguns and gun belts, and we're very easily identifiable as school guardians on school grounds. Another aspect that we provide is we provide a valuable team member to the school. Obviously, the guardians are employed, but they're your guardian. And our guardians work daily with school administration, staff, so that they're aware of any ongoings on site, any visitors that are coming, access control. We also monitor camera systems and provide presence during key hours throughout the school. And lastly, of course, obviously, it's been our experience that providing that familiar, friendly face daily just builds on the sense of security and comfort within the school, the community of the school. Once we assign a guardian to a school, typically that guardian stays at that school daily, and we have additional personnel such as supervisors and floaters that also check in regularly at these schools. Our goal is to obviously have people cross-trained at every location so that there is a constant flow of service in the event that a guardian is a day off or calls out sick. The floater will fill in and provide the same level of service throughout the day. Now, I think there's some misunderstanding as to what a guardian is. We've been able to ascertain contracts from schools that had existing law enforcement, and I can tell you that, and I've heard it more than once from principals, that they'll never go back to law enforcement. And that's not a knock on anyone in law enforcement. Obviously, I was a police officer for many years, and I'm always going to support law enforcement. That the level of security and service that they attain with a guardian, remember, when you're a guardian, you sign up to do exactly that. We stop the threat from happening at a school. Our personnel take great pride in what they provide to each school that we contract with. When you go into law enforcement, you may like forensics, for example, or you may like administrative work or detective work. But when you become a guardian, you know exactly what you're doing. You're being contracted to protect those children in that school at all expenses. Obviously, there is an internal vetting process that we take. We interview and do our internal vetting prior to submitting a candidate to a 3-step process that's delineated in state statute. The level 2 background check through the school board, the 10-panel drug test, and the psychological screening through an FDA certified psychologist. Once we have those 3 steps in process, then we would coordinate with the sheriff's office and have, our guardians attend training. Like I said, the grand majority of persons, especially there in Central Florida, does come with experience. And I think, obviously, it's fearful for some of you to think of pulling police out of schools, but I can tell you that the level of service and the level of security will not be diminished. If anything, it'll be increased, because you're gonna have somebody that's actively patrolling schools, actively engaged, and actively doing what they signed up to do. So if there's any questions, I'd love to field them.
All right, Chief, we've got the people that were gonna talk to us, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we heard that. Back to question, Mr. O'Brien?
I take exception to that. I think that the SROs that we have on campus right now are not only actively engaged, but they would resent the comment or the assumption that they're not. To say that we're gonna get better security, so far you're the only person to say that. So I think then why can't they be cops? They don't wanna do forensics? That's why they're SROs already, right? The SROs spend their days on our campus. So.
No, I am not saying that SROs don't do it, obviously they do. What I'm saying is, we've taken over, different, contracts with schools where they have off-duty officers working there. Obviously, the level of engagement is not the same as when you have someone that's actively working inside the campus. And as far as why these people are not police officers, well, because a lot of them are retirees. They're requiring law enforcement, military, and like someone mentioned earlier, there is a benefit to working Monday through Friday with weekends off and having Sunday off. So, I can't say as to why financially people do it, but I can tell you that there are people that prefer this. And I actually have, right off the top of my head, I have a former Marine that was a contractor, and his calling was to become a guardian. He actually took a pay cut to do his job, and currently works for us next to Orange County.
And the other concern.
Wait just a second, because Ms. Castillo has brought me, she's got a question. Ms. Castillo, and then you'll be next, Julie. Come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the presenters. I appreciate your insight and your expertise on this subject. I do have a couple of questions. My first question is actually not for the presenters, but rather for our partners in law enforcement. And Mr. Melendez actually alluded to this earlier, but I don't know that we actually got an answer. One of the things that obviously we're concerned with is having enough people to fill this role. So I'm wondering, as we plan for the next school year, do we have a pipeline of talent who is ready to be trained for this? I mean, we only have 2.5 months before school starts, and I'm really concerned that we may not actually have a pipeline. So if you guys can give me a little bit of insight on that, that would be really great. And I do have one additional question after that.
Well, I think we've already seen a number of, and I don't know if Mr. Munoz can speak to it or legally can talk about it yet, but he's already been contacted by a number of charter schools in our district to begin that process. He's confident, at least those that partner with his company, he can fill those positions. And we don't know till we start trying. It's a whole different animal trying to bring people into law enforcement than it is to this Guardian program. And I think if you looked across, do you have 112 or more Guardians?
112 in traditional public schools, not 38 in charter schools.
Okay, so an additional, 150. We're talking about 25, and even at 150, he's 10% each year. So we're talking 2.5 that we need to hire. Every one of us are dealing with more than 2.5 vacancies right now. So it's just a different animal. And I honestly resent, and I think these gentlemen would too, when you're talking about you didn't take time to understand the professional organization that they represent and what they've provided for many years in a row, and calling them a Honda from a Ferrari and painting this picture. It is a different service. So it's not the relationships that the police department gets to own, but the guardian and they still have those relationships. But from a security standpoint, which is what we're talking about for each of the schools, from the security standpoint, they've proven to be effective, and it's not reducing it by 50%. There's certain things they can't do by statute, but we're not reducing the security of the school, and that's what we're here talking about. And I'll speak for me.
Sure, thank you for that. I mean, I don't recall ever saying that.
No, you didn't, I'm
I'm
sorry,
really
that was
just-
some of the other comments, I apologize.
Sure, I'm just simply trying to understand, the entire issue. So I do appreciate, your input on that as well as, giving me some insight on the process for how we would, onboard some of these new, positions. My other question is, I don't know if this is the right question, but one of the, I guess, to mitigate some of the concerns about, what are we going to be missing if we do, I guess, when, at this point, we go with a guardian is, some of the functions that as a school district our constituents are, have been accustomed to a certain level of service, right? And what we're talking about here is some of the ancillary benefits of having an SRO within our schools. Is there anything that is stopping us from asking or implementing some of those same level of service, I guess, things that they do, like maybe teaching classes or being a little bit more involved with a guardian program? Is there anything legally that's stopping us from doing that? Have you guys, and this would be a great question for our consultants, is that something that other school districts do? Because our constituency is very used to having SROs exceptionally involved in the lives of our students.
We had talked about that, the programs, talked about that we've got 3 years of relationships with our charter schools and all of our elementary schools, because we only covered either none or a portion of those before this with a permanent SRO. None of that goes away. We're still involved in the monthly security assessments, the annual things. So those ongoing things will still be in law enforcement, and we're not going to throw away 3 years worth of relationship. We're only talking about the obligation of covering that school every single day. And if you looked, a percentage of 3 out of my 7 are covered by an off-duty job, so that's a different officer every single day. Chief Gauntlet has the same, and Osceola has the same. So there's already a percentage that don't get a traditional SRO. They just get a cop body in the school every day. So, when you look at the reality of what we're presenting here, it's not even a 100% impact. It's actually, I have a feeling they're going to get a more consistent product across all of our schools at this time.
And if I can add to that, the sheriff's office, along with the cities, we've partnered with the school board for years. When they call, we try to help them, whether it's graduations, football games, or you name it, or individual teachers. I can't tell you how many times when my kids went through school, I went and did 100 presentations in the schools. So the sheriff's office will still be a part of the charter schools statutorily with the threat assessments and all those. But in addition, when they call, we'll come. And that relationship will never end.
And we could schedule those presentations. That's something that we do already. So, we'd be happy to do that.
I'm okay, Robert.
I'm afraid if I don't go ahead and ask them now, I won't have the opportunity.
No, that's fine. Just going over.
I've been writing so.
Yeah, wait, let's make sure, Terry, does that answer your questions?
For now, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Gosh, I've got such a
Mr. Madison, back to you.
I've got a list of notes here, and it's concerning to me because I have relationships with SROs, and many of them in my district, and I'm gonna ask a barrage of a couple questions, maybe you can answer them all. And one is, it's gonna compromise our current SRO, because we have SROs that are in, I think, like St. Cloud's SRO at high school has been there, 10 years? And he's part of that family. Going with the guardian, is that gonna strip away the SROs that we currently have?
We're not talking about putting an SR or that guardian in that high school at this point.
But as you run more and more into a deficit, you will have the ability to say, you know what, we're gonna have to pull you from this school and replace it with a guardian. That scenario could happen. You mentioned football games. I know Braxton Chisholm, and I know several of the SROs, they attend the football games just just to be there, and they go there in uniform, and they don't go there getting paid. But I would think in an event like that, you need to have someone there with arresting authorities to be able to do that. I've got several questions, but Mr. Wiggins, no disrespect to what you're saying, but I can't place a lot of weight on past statistics of recruitment success, nothing to do with anybody in this room. We're just facing a perfect storm right now in Central Florida with our workforce. If you don't have a job, you're not looking for a job. There are people that are dying for warm bodies to work in their establishments, the Home Depots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they can have the ability to make a lot more than $30,000. You said it's going to take 50 applicants to fill 15 vacancies. That's a pretty broad. That's a big number to fill a small number. Are we going to get 50 applicants from this point forward, given the growth that especially Osceola County is going through, because we are in dire need of employment everywhere. So I care too much about our students, I care too much about our teachers, and I don't want to compromise anything. And I'm not saying that the guardianship is not the viable program. I just don't want to. What happens if you don't find enough applicants? What happens if we don't have enough guardians?
The same thing that happens if you don't have enough law enforcement. If you don't have enough people to meet the statutory requirement to have someone in your school. And I'm speaking for Polk County. I'm not here to tell you that this program is for you.
No, I
I'm
understand.
not convince you of that. I'm just here to give you information on my program. So I want to make sure that that's understood. I'm not here to to try to push you in one direction or the other. I'm just here to give you the information for my program.
We appreciate
And
that. We appreciate that.
I can tell you that those are my numbers. And so far, we have met our requirement. We've managed to get the number of applicants necessary to fill our vacancies. I don't know what the outcome will be for you. There is a certain level, I think because of the background, because of psychological testing, drug screening, and things of that nature, those are just, you need that number of applicants to get vacancies filled. And I have, once I get through that, I have people, that I turn away that pass the program, but I just have enough for my vacancies.
Have you seen any deficit? Have you seen any decline in applicants over the last, say, 3 years? Any?
Well, when we first started, we had to fill 80 positions, and we had hundreds of applicants.
Right.
And the next year, we had fewer, and so forth. And this year, when I posted, I had 50. I mean, that was the number. Actually, it's 54, but that's just what I need, and I get, the numbers just worked out in my favor. What it will be next year, I can't say, because I don't know what the economy is gonna look like. But we've managed to not run into that problem.
And what's the turnover ratio? How long do they stay at the bank before they?
I've had guardians that have been with the program since the beginning. I don't have an exact number for you. I can tell you I lose about 10% each school year. But we've managed to fill those vacancies when we post positions. And I've posted twice in 1 year, just because I needed, mid-year I had some vacancies and I wanted to make sure we stayed full allocation. So I had 2 trainings in 1 year, and I had to post twice in 1 year, and I managed to fill my vacancies and have enough for the class.
You don't allow,
Yes, sir.
your guardians, and I would assume sheriff, the guardian program that you'll all be are solely guardians. You're not allowing an employee to volunteer to be the guardian also.
In charter schools, there are some staff that in charter schools that are also guardians. So
And
yes,
that's
we do both.
traditional public?
No, not in traditional, just in the charter schools.
If I could mention too, talking about, I promise you, our staffing's harder to hire, And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I suspect that we review a higher percentage of applications to get the limited staffing that we are.
Right.
And it's just like the school crossing guard program, you know, we went to a management company to offer that versus all that coming from the police department, because when you added up the staffing hours to do the background, it's more difficult because we have criminal justice, so FBI standards of them even being allowed in the building to view, you know, criminal justice information is just more stringent of a process. And so we turned it over to another company, and we didn't have all that staffing work on top of us because we were in a perpetual, always hiring additional crossing guards.
Sporting events will be back, if a school has a guardian and on their sporting events, then we hire the SROs to attend the sporting events?
Just like we do now, and honestly, I'm not saying, I believe it does happen, officers show up, but they technically are not allowed to volunteer as security for a game and come in uniform. That's not something that they're allowed to do. So if they're doing it, out of the
Well, I
goodness
may have
of their
spoken
heart.
out of turn, I assume that they.
The reality of it is, if somebody has an interest and they
Please
put
don't
on a
throw
uniform.
Braxton under the bus. I've seen them both ways, so.
Who's just trying to get into the game?
I know what you're Just like, I'm sure Mr. Wiggins requires it of his, Mr. Munoz requires it of his, so whether they're a charter school employee, they're an employee of a company that provides this service, or they're a school board employee, you still have the requirements of being engaged with the school, with the administration, with the students. All that doesn't go away, it's just you wear a different uniform. And then we're there for everything else, anything outside of that incident. Law enforcement still responds to the schools, still is part of the schools in our community. We're still gonna have those relationships, we're still gonna be there for security at games, and all those things remain. It's talking about what, it just, if you haven't done it, you don't understand the difficulty, and that's across every agency in the state of Florida and beyond, how difficult it is to maintain your staffing. And if I hired a person today and everything went perfectly, I wouldn't realize that body. Best case scenario would be February of next year. And so we're always chasing those vacancies, and then this is a huge percentage of our department, and that's what it comes down to. But we wouldn't be bringing these gentlemen in. They're both former law enforcement with long careers in law enforcement, successful careers in law enforcement, so they've seen it from both sides. And I can promise you, cops are skeptical. If he didn't believe in the program, he wouldn't have left Polk County retired and taken the position he has. And so they've been successful, and I just think we're ignoring what's going on every county surrounding us and across the state. We're looking for all the reasons why it can't, instead of, it's not gonna be the same SRO, but we're still providing a professional level of security there. And there is no magic potion in any school, whether it is a cop in there or not, because we've seen examples of cops messing up, and I don't know of any stories yet. It could be, I don't watch the whole state, but I don't know of any stories where a guardian's messed up, but I've had to fire an SRO. We saw what happened in Broward County. I mean, that was, I won't use the adjective that I want. But that was a law enforcement officer who'd been in that position for many years. I think he was 20 years on the job, and he failed. So we're dealing with human beings, we never know. But we do have examples, and we've put the examples in front of you, of successful guardian programs that are professional, that care about their students, they care about what they're doing, and they've signed on for what potentially could be a job that costs them their life. And there's not many people in our community that are willing to do that. And I think we ought to give them the respect that is commensurate with that level of commitment to kids and community.
I wasn't, I didn't.
In addition to what that will provide the community in its entirety, because then again, we'll shift resources and we'll be able to combat all the things that go on in the community. Those kids outside of the school that we are responsible for.
That's all I have.
Mr. Melendez, and then we'll go back to Ms. Castillo's got another question.
Yeah, when we talk about level of service, does a guardian have access to law enforcement database?
No.
And that's another issue too, like the SROs, when I did my research on the task force, they actually check the law enforcement database every day, and they get their daily checks. we get like those all-point bulletins that say, hey, there's something that happens here or there. It's building an informant base. They can say, hey, something happened at that school, or at home, or in the street. Little Johnny goes to this school, and he can interview them, he can do things like that. They can pass information back and forth because they're in the same chain of command. So there's that seamless transition between so to me, I see the school as a sector. That's really what it is, it's a microsector. That's what they call the road deputies, when they separate the communities or the areas that they have to work, they call them sectors. The school is a sector. And every student, I hate to say this, but I wish every student was a perfect angel. But the reality is, every person in the world has to go through a school. And whether they graduate, that's another story. But even the criminals in the future are students. So losing that component of being able to outreach to those students, to be proactive policing, and be able to talk to them and get them familiar with the uniform. That was the other purpose of the SRO task force too, is to get familiar with the uniform. And a guardian, with all due respect, is not the same. Because we're not trying to bridge the gap of guardians in the community. We're trying to bridge the gap of policing with those folks in the community. And being able to engage with those students at an early age when they're still impressionable, even at the middle school level and the elementary school level, getting them comfortable that, hey, a badge and a uniform and a gun isn't scary. Right. That's a part of that. And we're losing sight of that. And if it's administrative, I agree with Terry Castillo, what she mentioned. Let's help you with recruitment. If recruitment is a problem, let's kill the animal. Let's not put a Band-Aid on a side issue. Let's kill the animal, and let's all get together and do things to promote, good cops. That's what I did. Lately, I've been doing monthly employee of the month, and I've been recognizing SROs. I've been trying to do my best to get people to say, hey, it is honorable. It's a noble profession to dedicate to the schools. And so I think that, we're kind of beating around the bush a little bit. The actual problem is recruitment, and let's get people excited about being a police officer. Let people know, the kids, that they're a young age, that they're a police officer. At the last workshop, we even talked about creating a junior ROTC program. Because there are ROTC programs for the military, but there's one that Orange County is doing for police officers. So I say you're doing it the wrong way. And if that means that there's a little bit of a blip, we'll help you. If you need more money, we'll help you. If you need to recruit people, I'm not here to tell you how to run your job because you're your own department. You know what I mean? But the point is, I really want to be a partner. And I really believe in that police officer model. And then you want to talk about community policing as a whole, that's how you get better outcomes. Because if you reach students while they're young, then they may not become a criminal. You don't have to have as many officers and a deputy in the street. But if you avoid them in the beginning and they become criminals later, now you need more deputies in the street. Let's be proactive, engage these kids, be wonderful role models, and nip it in the butt in the very beginning. And so, and the other action too is, I already mentioned that. We talked about recruitment and the community service. So those are the three things that I have. And again, we're also talking about, the drug screening. John and I are probably the only board members that go to expulsion hearings. So we see the negative side too. And we do a lot of drug incidents. Now, I don't know what the percentage is, and I'm sorry if I gave you a percentage, but there are a good number of incidents. So we're not just looking for security guards to protect us in case of an incident or active shooter training. There's a lot of other incidents that happen, such as the fight at Liberty High School. The reason why I'm part of the SRO task force, there was a huge fight. So it's not just security guard, is a guardian allowed to intervene in a fight? Are they allowed to get in there and put hands on a student? Well, that's actually a question. Are guardians allowed to intervene in a fight and put hands on a student?
As any other district member is, by policy, you can prevent a student from harming himself or someone else. So the answer to that question is yes. And I want to touch on the fact that our guardians are involved in crime prevention at their school. By statute, each school is required to have a crime prevention program, and at their particular assigned school, those guardians do participate in that. They are engaged with students. We've had students come to our guardians and report things to them. So they know that that person, for our traditional schools, that person in that uniform is there to protect them. So they are engaged. I don't want you to misunderstand that they are hands off completely and don't interact with our students, because they do in a positive way. They are not law enforcement, and you can say that 20 different ways, but the bottom line is they aren't.
and that goodwill, so I'm not doubting the fact that there can't be
Right,
positive
right.
interactions, but the problem is, you don't make that association with law enforcement. So when they graduate and they go on to the real world, out of the schools, they think, oh, the good people were the guardians, and the bad people
Well,
were the cops. And that's the worst thing that can happen.
I can speak to the elementary schools because that's where my guardians are. As you get into middle and high, I think you may experience more what you are speaking to with fighting and with drugs and things of that nature because, you know, that middle school age is important. That is, you know, as they're entering that age, it's important to make sure they're on the right path. So I'm not here to say guardians can replace all SRO and law enforcement schools. That's not what I'm saying.
And that's not what we're saying, and I think part of that is just like any other entity, you know, we're charged with the security of that, and if we had information, crime information, or those kind of things, we're gonna go just like we do now, directly to that entity, and we go to those in charge of security for the schools, so that, you know, it doesn't, in my mind, change at all, and you know, those relationships, you know, in school, you've got a finite amount of time for interaction between the officers and the students, and that's between classes, lunchtime, and maybe in an after-school activity. But there's still a limited amount of time. We still accomplish those things by still having the relationship with the schools, but being out in their community. And, you know, when you say look at it as a micro sector, well, again, we don't have that luxury. So if we look at it as a micro sector, each of the schools, then we would put multiple schools together and have one SRO responsible for multiple schools. But see, we can't do that because we have to put them in each school, you know, for the security only. It's not all the other things. There's nothing in the law that talks about the other things. So, you know, what is the average, you know, I don't know, what's the average number of students in each classroom per teacher? So I'm gonna throw an arbitrary number. If that's 30 students per teacher, if you've got a law that mandated you to now have, the maximum you could have is 10 students per teacher, what are you gonna do? You're gonna, you know, I mean, could you hire that many teachers? 2 or 3 times the number of teachers you have today? Those are the realities that we're talking about here, and that's where we're coming at, you know, but we're not saying just, you know, hand out guns at lunchtime to English teachers. We're talking about professional entities, and I think that's what continues to get lost. We're not trying to compare that they're gonna do everything that law enforcement does, but for the security of the school, I am confident that they're gonna provide a professional service for you. And we're gonna be here to make sure of that. And if we've got somebody that we don't, just like we have an SRO that we don't think is doing their job, it's the same thing. We will go to whether, you know, whoever is responsible for that entity, and we'll say, these are the reasons, A, B, and C, why this person is not doing the role that they've been hired to do, or they're not working out. You know, we're not gonna lose any of that.
Are you done?
The one thing I would say,
Thank you.
is I agreed to, like, and I spoke with Chief before on the phone for a spirit of transparency to discuss it. I've been seeing a transitionary period. For instance, like, I understand, you actually gave a great example. Some charter schools can start up tomorrow and they're in a plaza, and according to my understanding, you have to supply somebody there. I can appreciate, like, maybe on the initial charter application, the charter applicant says that they want an SRO and a guardian. And if they want an SRO, they maybe get a guardian that first year to transition, because we don't even know if they're gonna be successful or not. And plus, you know, they have to have certain FTE, or number of students that attend a school in order to be able to fund it. So that's something that I'm willing to support 100% without any compromise. And that is, you know, when the charter wants to apply, that first year they get a guardian, even if they want an SRO, because, you know, there's just no time to ramp it up and things like that. And then the following school year, then maybe transition to an SRO with a negotiated contract. That's an ideal world. I know that I can only ask for something.
Well, it's better than where we are
But
today.
that's something that I'm willing to initially right now say, okay, I'm on board with that 100% without any resistance. Is if the charter schools put on their application, the initial application, before we even approve it on the school board, so that way there's time to ramp up and say, even if you want an SRO, even if you're a gazillionaire, you know, charter school, that you still can use a guardian as a temporary bridge to allow the staffing to catch up, and that way we can alleviate part of that portion. And I'm just trying to be as good faith negotiator as possible.
Ms. Castillo's got a question, Mr. Bass has a question.
Okay, thank you.
Wait just a second, Terry. Before we get there, though, I would like to get us wrapped up pretty close to 11:30 today, and I think what we're gonna have to do then is the board, but maybe even to this afternoon's meeting, we're gonna have some internal conversations about where we think this goes, I think, and probably some pretty heavy debate. And I've got just a clarification before we get to Ms. Castillo's question, that is probably for all three agencies, because I got a little confused. This conversation today is a discussion about guardians in potentially charter schools and elementary schools, not middle schools and not high schools. Is that a true statement or not a true statement?
Maybe all three of us need to answer.
Well, I'd like all three of you to, because I don't know if I'm on the same page.
Yes is the answer to your question. For me, I would commit to only charter schools. I'm fine today with my staffing levels, but I'm in a better position than most.
And that was my question. That was actually my question.
Chief Dalton?
The charter schools that I have, I've covered with off-duty, so there's a different officer in that school every single day, so the inconsistency is there. That's a concern.
That worries me too.
Having a guardian locked to that school, building relationships each and every day, because the students at those particular charter schools can't have much of a relationship because there's a different officer there every day.
But your question, the question of
My specific
high
question
schools
is,
and middle schools,
I'm a very big proponent of having standard SROs in the high school and the middle schools.
okay. Sheriff?
Same.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't even know elementary schools were on the table, Chairman, so thank you for.
Well, that's what I thought from early conversations.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Ms. Castillo, you're next, and then,
Mr. Chairman, can
Yeah.
I still understand? You're only gonna put them in charter schools. Are you only gonna put them in charter
I'm
schools?
not making any commitments beyond the charter schools right now. That's just in.
Sheriff, are you only doing the charter schools right now?
Yes.
Okay. Judy.
Wait, so then this is confusing because now we've heard 6 different answers to the same question. So, are we today discussing the potential for charter schools and elementary schools?
because I thought what I heard was elementary schools and charter schools.
That's what I heard just now.
Yep.
So, but I heard multiple answers, so I heard both ways. So are we talking about elementary schools and charter schools, or only, or is each agency different?
What I heard, and I'm gonna ask the two chiefs and the sheriff to correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, the sheriff and Kissimmee, you're talking only charter schools for this year.
And that's all I'm talking about is.
All right, and same with St. Cloud, we're not talking for this coming school year, elementary.
Because that's going to be important when we have a conversation later.
Yeah.
They don't have it both ways, unbelievable.
Ms. Castillo?
Yes, hi, thank you. Sorry, team, I had to drop off for about 5 minutes, so if this question was answered, I apologize for asking one more time. But speaking of talent management, I think that we all understand where we stand right now. It is an issue with having enough people to cover these goals. We get it. My question is, I'm wondering if there's going to be a gap in service, right? I think Mr. Bass was alluding to this a little bit earlier when he asked about what if we do not have enough people? You know, we have 2.5 months until school starts. What happens if, I'm not saying if it does, what happens if we do not have enough guardians at that point? Is our law enforcement agencies able to partner with us until we do have
Yes.
full capacity?
Yes.
Okay,
You have no choice.
Right.
If you're missing one, we will provide you a body.
okay,
But I
thank you. Go ahead, sorry.
that's good. Is that do you have another question, Terry? Or is that it?
I do not, sir, thank you.
No, Chief, you just said it very bluntly a minute ago, and that's a big concern I have with the way we're going right now. It's a different person every day, because I think there's huge benefit to continuity and knowing who the person is to go talk to. So I think that worries me, period, I mean, no matter what. So I don't know where we're gonna go. I think as a board, we're gonna have to at least have a pretty good discussion about this, probably amongst ourselves, which won't have
One
to.
thing I'll echo into as we get into this topic is you have to have some serious discussion about the SRO contracts going forward, because the communities are stretched razor thin right now.
Mhm.
when it comes to budgets and expansion and needs and vacancies and everything else. So unfortunately, all this plays into this. We don't want to be in having to have this conversation. This is done out of absolute operational need. But the bottom line is we've got to find some solutions to our dilemma. And we have a massively growing county that is impacting all of us. And I can't continue to absorb the operational impact of doing this. And that's the same thing for Chief Odell as well as the sheriff. So it's a tough.
When we get to that piece of the conversation, and I kind of didn't want to go here, but since you kind of brought it up, when this started, I don't know, 3 years ago or whenever it was, and we all sat in a room and we had an intergovernmental meeting, the boards at that time were committed to funding it. And that may have changed. There's probably different boards, I'm sure, at this point than there were 3 or 4 years ago at the two cities in the county. And I don't know where they stand. So that, I mean, when we get down to that piece, those boards, I believe, have to be part of that discussion on whether they choose to not want to fund or to fund. Two, just in fairness, since they were the ones who stepped up before and kind of made that commitment.
I've spoken to mine, they fund it. That's not about a funding.
Okay.
It's, again, and that's where as we go forward, those discussions need to happen. If we go back to at least when I got here 8 years ago, we had high school, middle, and we had 3 SROs for 7 elementary schools. And but the reality in law enforcement, with everything going on, less and less applicants are coming forward. And so, I look to my partner agencies and, they've got a higher percentage of vacancies right now. And if that trend continues, then we may have to have that conversation. But for the purpose of the next school year, it's charter schools.
Okay.
And if trends change over time, and we as a society have failed our law enforcement, in my opinion.
Sure.
These little electronic bricks of distraction have caused us to look negatively towards. But if later down the road, if there is an uptick of people wanting to get in law enforcement, I mean, I would hope that if we do have a relationship with a guardian program, that we can start bringing SROs back into the fold. I'm trying to be optimistic here, but and I'm hoping that we wouldn't be contractually bound to say, okay, no, we can't accept any more SROs. We have to stick with just guardians. So I don't know if that's something we'll have to discuss. And
we'll be working on the contract in the next 30 days. 3 chiefs, 2 chiefs and sheriff have agreed that let's shoot for just one contract. That's the same for each agency, so there's consistency.
Do they look similar now? I can't remember.
Yeah, they're very similar now.
No, they're not. The sheriff's office is radically different. The two cities are similar, the sheriff is not. The 2 cities have about 8, 9-page contracts, the sheriff's about 5-page.
Okay, I remember last year when we did them, I looked at them, and I can't remember now.
Mr. Bass, just to expand on your point of, yes, we're constantly assessing, and I've even had that conversation with at least one of our large charter schools that, to find that balance. And I said, if we got to, based on today's model, if we got to somewhere in the ballpark of 3 SROs servicing 7 elementary schools, or we got into a comfortable place, I would like to be able to go back to our large charter schools and talk about an SRO. I just can't do it today.
no, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yes,
I just appreciate that.
That's part of always.
So that's our ultimate goal.
where we're at.
See, 100% of the people in this room, well, 99%, would rather have SROs, but financially and fundamentally with the lack of personnel, that's the elephant in the room, and I get that. And
We make budget decisions every day.
Yeah.
Based on lots of things, nothing to do with SROs, just on academics and teachers and resources and human resources and everything else every single day. So we get that part, and we understand that part.
And I would just, Robert, with all due respect, I think I disagree, because if 99% of people in this room want one thing, then you sort out that solution. Then you don't figure out a way to solve a different problem, you solve that problem. If we're gonna go to Mars, they're building a spaceship to go to Mars. So I mean, in the end, there's a solution that can be found. It's just a matter of where you focus your efforts. So if that's what we want, then that's what we would be doing here. We would be discussing, not the transition, but we would be discussing how we make that happen. So.
Don't disagree with that. We're approaching 11:30. Any other comments? If not, thank you all very, very much for coming.
Mr. Wiggins, thank you for.
Mr. Wiggins, thank
I
you for being
appreciate that,
here.
sir.